You've got your average run-of-the-mill motorcycles. You've got your Yamaha R6s, your Honda Rebels, your Suzuki 600s. These are the bread and butter of the motorcycling world. Then you have bikes that are a little bit more rare. Maybe a Ducati 998 or a first-generation Daytona 675R. Then you have the elite, seldom seen motorcycles like the BMW HP4 races of the world. And then, my sweet squidlets, you have the unobtainables. The motorcycles that are either so exceedingly rare, so eye-wateringly expensive, or both that you and I, being the mere mortals that we are, will never see one, let alone get our grubby little tentacles all over one to try and get it wide open throttle and see what it's all about. These are the double holographic motorcycles of the two-wheeled world. Hello everybody, I am your host, the illustrious and immortal Gummy Cube, also known as Dat Boy Yami Noob, back once again to deliver knowledge, courage, insight, wonder, and wisdom into your sweet little brains. Today we're looking at 7 of the most unobtainable motorcycles known to man. These bikes are not only extremely expensive, but they're stupidly rare and are either locked away in some rich guy's house or stuck in a museum somewhere. Now before we jump into this list, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to stay up to date on all the videos we're pumping out here at Yami Noob HQ. We're doing 2 of these list and video essay style videos per week now, so you're gonna want to stay tuned for that. Guys, I wanted to take a moment and talk about a serious topic. As much as we bikers hate to admit it, cars are a necessary evil. If you're like me, buying a brand new car is a bit of a silly idea. I always try to pick up a slightly used vehicle that's already taken the depreciation hit, so I get a better deal. It's what I did with my beloved 2014 370Z. The only issue with that is that the factory warranty on most vehicles tends to run out a little bit sooner than you'd like. That's where Otmo comes in. Otmo is an alternative to car warranties. Instead of paying upfront for a warranty, Otmo is a month-to-month cost-sharing alternative, so you choose when you need coverage and how much you want to spend. The best part? You don't lock into a contract. It's super easy to set up. The guys over at Otmo hooked me up with a warranty for the Z, and I was shocked at how easy it was to log in and get started. You sign up, shoot some video of your vehicle so the guys at Otmo can get a feel for what they're covering, and that's about it. No paperwork, no pushy salesman, nothing like that. All mechanical and electrical repairs are covered under Otmo, and if you don't make a claim, you can get your cash back. Guys, this one's a no-brainer. For a limited time, Otmo is offering a $25 Amazon gift card for any Yami fan by clicking the link below and filling out the form. Seriously, no purchase necessary. Just fill out the form and you can get yourself a $25 gift card. You must have a 2009 or newer vehicle to qualify though. So click the link below, check these guys out. I'm super excited to support them. The founder is a former mechanic with over 14 years of experience, so he knows what goes into car repairs. Again, check out Otmo in the link below, get started with them, and get covered. All right, let's jump into this one. Our first contender, a collaboration between one of the greatest names in motorsports and the finest red motorcycle that Italy has yet to offer. Number 1, the Ducati 916 Senna. Look at it. Gaze upon it with your filthy casual eyes. The Ducati 916 is already one of those rare and achingly beautiful old school Ducatis that I'll likely never get my hands on. Old school air-cooled 916cc V-twin in a tight compact chassis makes this bike an absolute peach. But lo and behold, they made a special variant adorned with Brazilian F1 driver Ayrton Senna's name. Now, it might seem a little odd that Ducati branded a motorcycle with Ayrton Senna's namesake, being that the man drove cars professionally for a living. As a side note, can we get a $50,000 Rossi Edition R1? For the love of God, I think we deserve that. This story does actually add up when you check the facts. Claudio Castiglione, who along with his brother helmed the Caviga group, which owned Ducati, Husqvarna, and MV Agusta at one point, was a generous sort of guy who was known to commit to loyalty and fealty like a mafioso. Except he was a pleasant guy, he didn't kill any people as far as I know. It's no surprise then that Claudio was a personal friend of Senna's and wanted to partner up and do something cool together, like a collabo. Ayrton was a prolific Ducati buyer, so naturally it made sense to partner up. He had agreed to the collaboration before his death and wanted the profits to provide Brazilian children back home with free sports facilities as long as those kids stayed in school. The first edition of this bike came through in 1995 in silver body color and red wheels, an SP chassis, which to the uninitiated is Ducati speak for the high-spec version of their bike, and Öhlins shock, Brembo brakes, and stainless steel lines. Ducati sold out of all 200 of the initial run, then they did another 100 in cap production. It's not that this bike is super expensive. I found them online at auction going for around $30,000, but it's that they are just so damn hard to find when they come available, since only 300 were ever made. made. The 916 Senna edition has everything you'd want from an unobtainable bike. A great story, a limited supply, and a limited delivery. Up next is one that does have a stupidly expensive price tag. Number 2, the 1951 Vincent White Shadow in Chinese red. You might look at this motorcycle and say, well, it looks like any other old bike from the 50s, but that's where you'd be wrong. The Vincent Motorcycle Company started in 1928 and designed two motors, a 500cc single and a 1000cc V-twin. And in 1948, they released their Series C Vincent Shadow, which used a 50-degree V-twin. Here's where things get interesting. Vincent only built 1,507 of the black Shadows, and of those, only 15 were the White Shadow version, which meant that the engine case covers were left unpainted, whereas in the black Shadows, they were painted, well, black. And only one of these bikes was in Chinese red, which is a weird name for a color, but hey, that was back in the 50s. And that's why this bike sold at auction for $434,000. That's right, it sold for nearly $500,000. I mean, it's literally one of a kind. There is no other red White Shadow variant of this motorcycle. Do I think it's a little silly? Sure, I'd never pay that much for a bike. Then again, who knows? If I was a billionaire, maybe I would for the memes, but boy, that's a lot for something on two wheels. It strikes me as almost a story that rich guys love to tell, that it's the rarest of the rare bikes. You could have a Vincent White Shadow, but if you wanted to be the truly upper crust of the elite, you'd have the red Chinese variant of it. Either way, this is an absolutely unobtainable motorcycle, price notwithstanding. Best of luck ever getting it, seeing it, or even looking at it, since there's literally only one in the world. Up next is the Italian bike you won't want to miss since it comes pre-packaged with racing heritage. Number 3, the Moto Guzzi Le Mans 1000 SE. Just look at it. The epitome of old school racing cool. The Moto Guzzi Le Mans is a bike you most assuredly will never be able to own. As if a regular Moto Guzzi wasn't enough, this bike is the most Guzzi of Guzzis. The concept of the Moto Guzzi Le Mans motorcycle started in 1971 when Jan Kampen wanted to build a Moto Guzzi bike for the Zandvoort 6-hour race. He had the bike's capacity increased to 810 cc's as he worked with Lino Tanti, but their ambitions grew as they wanted to bore out the engines even further and enter into the 24 Bol d'Or at Le Mans. The bike led the race for 10 hours but ultimately finished in 3rd place. Lino Tanti continued down this path and wanted to develop the bike for sale and for racing. After testing and racing, they eventually launched the 850 Le Mans for sale. They iterated on this bike for a few years and eventually ended up at the final iteration, the Le Mans 1000 SC, for the special edition. It was introduced in 1986 and they only produced it for 2 years since it was a model that commemorated the 20th anniversary of the Moto Guzzi V7 in 1967. One of the most iconic Guzzis. The 1000 SC was done up in all red, but a few sold had black accents on the engines and transmission case covers. To give you an idea of rarity, only 100 of these made it to the US, so good luck trying to cop one for sale. Although the Moto Guzzi Le Mans is not a rare bike, you can find examples of the 850 for sale pretty frequently, it will be very hard to find an example of a 1000 Le Mans SE. I know I've tried finding some online and to no avail. Our next bike is another Italian special, and of course this list was going to be full of Italian bikes. Number 4, the Ducati Desmosedici RR. I'd be remiss to not include the Ducati Desmosedici RR in a video about rare and exclusive motorcycles. It's the epitome of the rare and high-performance Ducatis of the world. The Desmosedici stands in a class of its own. Being the newest bike on this list, you'd imagine that a motorcycle manufactured in the late 2000s wouldn't be so unobtainable, but best of luck trying to find one of these motorcycles for sale. And if you do, they'll likely fetch upwards of $75,000, which, I don't know about you, but I certainly don't have 75 G's lying around, which is insane when you consider that they sold brand new for 72 grand. Talk about resale value. So what makes the Desmosedici so special besides its super cool name? The Desmosedici was a limited production bike. Only about 1,500 of them were ever made, and they were produced only from 2007 and 2008, and it was the closest thing to a GP bike you could buy at the time. It's interesting though because at the time, its 197 horsepower output was so insane that no other production bike could even touch it. Even though today Ducati's pumping out the new V4R with 240 horsepower. 20% power gains in 10 years is pretty amazing, and all with the factory warranty. It came from the factory with a set of Marchesini magnesium wheels, carbon fiber bodywork, Brembo brakes, Öhlins suspension, and Magneti Marelli electronics package, which by today's standards seems like pretty normal kit you'd get on any top-shelf leader bike, but this was space-age stuff back in the late 2000s. The cool thing to note is that the Desmosedici RR's engine derives straight from the MotoGP bike with a mighty 990cc V4, at a time when there were no production V4s in Ducati's lineup. It had a mind-boggling 14,000 RPM redline, making it a monster back then and a monster today. It's important to note that only 300 of these amazing machines made it to the US, so if you're watching this in the States, know that it will be extremely difficult to try to find and locate one of them. But if you're lucky enough to own one, you'll know why it's so damn special. Our next bike is a 70s blast from the past. Number 5, the 1971 Rickman Enfield Interceptor. This unassuming cafe racer looking motorcycle belies an interesting story and an equally rare disposition. The 1971 Rickman Enfield Interceptor deserves a quick history rundown. The Rickman comes from the Rickman brothers of the company of the same name in the UK, with a reputation for building motorcycle chassis that were super light, strong, and cradling the highest output engines of their day. They never built engines of their own, however, and they mated them with what they could find into their amazing chassis. One of these special bikes was the Interceptor. Using a 750cc mill from Royal Enfield, they built the Rickman Enfield Interceptors. Through some unforeseen circumstances, Royal Enfield went into bankruptcy and left 140 of these 750cc engines sitting on a dock. They were intended to go to Italy but never made it there. The Rickmans acquired these engines and placed them into their legendary chassis, producing a limited run. This bike weighed only 365 pounds and didn't even have turn signals. Seriously. It came specced out with Barani rims, Suriani forks, dual Girling shocks at the rear, and some Lockheed brakes on drilled discs in the front, making it leaps and bounds better than most bikes at the time. This was in 1971, if you recall. This bike had a dry sump oil system, but it didn't need an external tank. It had a separate tank built into the engine case. That's crazy. It made about 60 horsepower, which doesn't seem like a lot by today's standards, but when you consider its lightweight chassis and focused design, I bet this makes this bike a peach to ride. As you can imagine, since it's a hand-built, limited production Frankenstein bike that was lovingly made, they are extremely hard to come by, but boy if they don't seem like absolute gems. Up next is one of the oldest bikes in our lineup. Number 6, the 1931 Coventry Eagle. The 1931 Coventry Eagle is one of those ultra-rare double holographic bikes you'll likely never see. It was built as a restoration by Mike Crane as a rideable and show-worthy bike that debuted in 2010 after being manufactured in 1931. It came with a 172cc two-stroke single engine and chain drive. The Coventry Eagle has a history in motorsports, but World War II threw a bit of a wrench into that equation. Coventry got their start with bicycles in the Victorian era and evolved into motorcycles as time went on. It's not known exactly how many of these bikes were made, but it's known to be pretty damn rare, even though it has just a 172cc engine, which by modern standards makes it an absolute slouch. It's a charming piece of history that some rich dude probably paid way too much money for. And our final unobtainable bike will come as no surprise to those of you who know your rare motorcycles. Number 7, the Brough Superior SS100. If you've never heard of Brough, here's a quick rundown. The motorcycles were first manufactured in the early 20th century and were widely known as the Rolls-Royce of motorcycling. The build quality was leaps and bounds above any manufacturer at the time, so much so that even Lawrence of Arabia owned one. The Brough Superior SS100 is a revitalization of the brand for the modern era. It has a 997cc V-twin producing about 120 horsepower and a lightweight chassis that's been painstakingly handmade. But it's no slouch either. The bike can easily get you into some trouble on a back road. Now, despite this bike's semi-reasonable $60,000 price point, it's so ridiculously hard to find one for sale, you might never even see one in person. Broughs are special bikes, and even though purists might tell you the SS100 isn't a true Brough, it's pretty damn unobtainable.